The books, so many of them, calling my name, every single one of them, all night, all day, even when I am away. I can't escape it. I know I have to read them one day. It is fate. But today's not that day. Yet. Today, we're talking about anime. About 90 days of it. So a lot has happened, I think. Lots of books, bunch of new pins, ideas, and drawing of course. Not as much as I hoped, but hey, I take what I can get. About 100 project files on my computer, and some pages filled out with doodles and stuff on paper. I feel like it wasn't made clear in the previous 90-day video. So, to set the record straight, I've never really drawn properly and as intensely as I did when I started the 90 days of CalArts, which means in the start of February. So at the time of typing this up, I would have about 8 months worth of time where I've been drawing, or ever since my art journey began. So February of this year marks the start of my art journey. And of course, I've been doing a fair amount of drawing since then, but I just wanted you to keep that in mind. And most of what I drew and have been drawing was and were copies of screenshots and other drawings and so on. No tracing of course, but if I didn't specifically say that it was a freehand drawing of mine, then it probably was a copy. So I kind of felt like a cheat. I mean, I guess I'm not supposed to feel like it, but hey, getting that type of response after basically just redrawing someone else's work, it would be hard not to get imposter syndrome, I guess. So, to fix that, I try to set a plan for the 90 days of anime, specifically to be able to draw something on my own by the end of it. Setting a plan for yourself when you're starting out with something is kind of hard though, because unless you have a set curriculum like a school, you kind of learn and figure out so many cool new things as you go that the plan you set a month ago has been changed and juggled around twice in the past 2 days alone, especially with the amount of books I've got now and started to read. Check out what came in the mail today. If after the current 90 days, I ended up with something similar to what I showed at the end of the 90 days of CalArts, I would have failed everyone. Horribly so. Don't you worry, boys and gals. Matriks don't miss. No, sir. I would definitely not have been able to make this after 90 days of anime if I used the same formula I did in my last 90 days. So what is my secret? Books. A lot of books. Really old ones too. I know I could just go on YouTube or somewhere else on the internet and find a bunch of tutorials. Considering the topic was anime, there should be no shortage whatsoever to find a way to draw it. But I realized a few things. I cannot focus on videos sometimes. Maybe their format doesn't sit well with me, the instructions are unclear, their voice is unclear, I get distracted by different video, no power. With books, I can take them almost anywhere. I can read them as slow as I need, even though I'm a fast reader, reread them again, save them for later, mark down a specific page I can instantly pull up, and so on. I know I'm yapping a lot about books, but don't worry, it's almost over. Another great thing about the books I bought is that they were made by actual mangakas and other professionals from Japan. And since the books are old, means I'll get a lot of tips on how to do traditional techniques to achieve illustrations like you see in manga, by hand, if needed. Not that you need a Japanese person to teach you. Shut up. Not that you need a Japanese person to teach you how to draw anime or manga. I just wanted to be sure that the source that I was using to learn how to draw anime was a really solid one, and not a secondhand account on how to do it, if you know what I mean. And I don't really fancy the modern look of anime as it is now, so I opted to go for more a 80s/90s anime kind of look. Get it? 90 days. So I was gonna call this video 90 days of retro anime, but 90 days of anime sounds better. So a lot of the anime or manga that I focused on was stuff like Azumanga Daioh, Cowboy Bebop, Evangelion, and some other stuff I guess, as long as I liked their art style. I know JoJo is technically an old anime, but I didn't study that, so there will be no JoJo in this video. Okay, maybe just a little bit of JoJo. I was also asked to draw Deku, but I drew Bakugo. Suck it, Grail. You're an artist too, you can draw them yourself. And then there's also Klein from Sword Art Online. I got your back, guys. Alright, let's get on with the video, I guess. This video is not the first time that I tried to draw some anime. Not so long after my 90 days of CalArts, I really wanted to draw some anime, and by draw I mean copy. So I took this shot from Cowboy Bebop and spent 5 hours copying it. At that point I thought to myself, if every time I draw anime, it is going to take me 5 hours to copy a single shot, we are not going to make it out of 2024 alive. So that's when I decided, hey, I can draw anime for 90 days, and as I already said, I wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet by the end of it this time. So I started buying the aforementioned books and started drawing. We start off with some floating heads, much like I did in the 90 days of CalArts, and they're okay. They did take me some time to do, but considering I spent like 80 minutes on a single CalArts head when I first started out, I already kinda guessed that this would just be a temporary thing. And honestly, other than reading through the books and copying floating heads, nothing too special happened for a while. I probably mostly improved my eyes and attention to detail, considering how many more details there are in anime and manga compared to a simple CalArts cartoon. And after the 5th drawing, I also realized I needed some structure when constructing the head. Never again. I also started learning about and playing around with so-called screen tones. For those who don't know, that's mostly dots, lines, or other patterns that create the illusion of the black and white spectrum, without actually being gray, for example. I mean, grayscaling exists and whatnot, but I was more determined to learn more about the OG screen tones. There's some pretty cool drawings that can be achieved by simply using screen tone and cross-hatching, if you will. And if you don't believe me, here's a quick bad example from day 54. I just have to be more careful of the moire effect when using screen tones digitally. It's a pain in the ass, and it's all in black or white, well except that it is a sketch, so the strokes can be considered gray. But why even bother with color if I can't even make something look good in black and white? But I have plans for looking into colors this winter for sure. I even have a book about colors, so I was mostly building up my information about anime and manga and solidifying what type of style I wanted to go for. Around week 2 and 3, I started going from copying floating heads to copying floating busts and torsos. I even did a drawing based on a real life reference, just to benchmark my capabilities, but I honestly kinda rushed it, not gonna lie. I also started playing around with brush thickness here. I'm not so sure what made me crack it, but I realized that if I had a smaller brush size, drawing finer details would be a lot easier, as if it wasn't obvious enough. But basically, you should probably adjust the brush size depending on the size of your canvas. Maybe you could easily tell the difference if I put a before and after comparison with one drawing made with a thick brush and one with a smaller brush. So I drew some more with a smaller brush size and tried decreasing it yet again, and it seems like I found a brush size that I was happy with, because I didn't change it after this. However, I did change the brush type, but more about that later. Then we reached day 30, which is when I stopped copying manga panels and anime shots, and focused on drawing from real life references. I basically planned to copy the first month, draw real life references the second, and puzzle together my own drawings in the last month. Everything was going at a steady pace until day 41, when I made this drawing. This is when I realized that I should probably change up my method and do some more practice and sketching in some shape or form, compared to trying to complete a drawing every day. So I did. In just about a week, I did 50 rough sketches of what I guess we will call mannequins. They don't look that good now, but the important part was that they were starting to look better over time, even if it wasn't that much of a difference. My idea was that I wanted to get better at sketching the figure of a person, both quickly and effortlessly, and worry more about the silhouette or outline of a person, since in my head, the silhouette matters the most. It is essentially the canvas that you are going to put details on. So it's like silhouette plus details equals 3D. It's kinda easier if I just show you a cube silhouette and then add the details. Does it make sense now? Basically, my line of thought was that if I only try to draw one complete drawing, I'll only get to sketch a figure about once or twice in that drawing in a single day. Whereas if I were to quickly sketch out a mannequin in around 15 minutes or 30 if you need time, I could do 10 a day, and if I were to do that for 90 days, I would be closer to having drawn the human figure about 1,000 times, compared to like 90 times if I focus on completing every drawing I set out to do. I think I also learned that learning a new thing, it doesn't have to be drawing, is a bit easier if you've gone through a similar type of training montage in the past. I don't know what to call it, it's just a type of mindset you should have when starting out, I guess. Like the human figure, there's a lot of parts to it and things to remember, especially as you get better and decide to put more details on it. Some parts are more complex and deserve more attention, of course, but you have to study the entire body, not just certain parts. But the more you practice, memorize, and start learning more about your way to do it, the better you will get. As long as you can reflect on yourself and point out mistakes and weaknesses on your own, or get a friend to give some input. I mean, art doesn't have to be objective and absolute, but to me, If it's not objective or realistic, it should strive to be appealing, which coincidentally may have some ties attached to realism or whatever, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, I guess the practice paid off, since on day 43 I did this. Now the body looks fine, but I was not proud of the face, not to mention that I have no idea on how to use an airbrush. Luckily, I have some books on just that. Well, technically they're about rendering, but as I said, I haven't really worried about colors whatsoever, since that is something I'll focus on this upcoming winter. I also decided to switch my brush type after this, since it wasn't dynamic at all, because with the one I used, if I did a horizontal stroke, it would be thin, but if I did a vertical stroke, it would be thick, no matter my pen pressure. So I swapped it out to have more control of my strokes. I think I realized too late that perhaps the brush size was too small as well, that or the lines were too flat. I hope I fixed this though, since I've changed my brush type to something more dynamic, and I've looked into layering my strokes to emphasize certain lines in my drawings to make them pop. The best examples I have is from one of my books talking about it. No line weight, line weight. I remember feeling like my drawings were really flat, especially on their own with no background stuff. Remember the blur? But simply layering some strokes seems to go a long way, and it's not really a difficult thing to get into either. Obviously, I haven't perfected it yet, but I'm happier with it than I am without it. And as I said, I was not proud of the face, so I went back to copying a bunch of anime faces and the heads that they were attached to, trying to get some ideas and such. I'm really going to spend some time on studying the head and face along with the rest of the body after this project, since the little time I spent on them during this project taught me some things as well. If not that, then they at least helped me brush up on what little I knew about it. Which leads us to day 60. This is the month where I pretty much tested myself to see how much I've learned. I managed to do this side profile. The face looks fine. The ear's a bit small maybe, and I can work on the hair. So you know I ordered a book just about that. Finally being able to draw freehand gave me a good benchmark on what I can and can't do, both confidently and not so confidently. You might think something looks right, then realize that you are delusional, but not to worry. That means you get to practice and learn about your mistakes. And guess what? Loose makes a return, baby. Yup. It was just a sketch, and it's not really anime, and except for some hiccups like the arms and hands, I'd say it looks okay. I mean, it's leaps better than what I came up with at the end of the 90 days of CalArts. So I said that freehand drawings were a good benchmark, and that is still true, because I realized I had no idea on how to draw a man. I only drew like 2 of them up until this point, and to be completely honest, the idea of drawing men was pretty boring. I'm not really a huge fan of action movies and anime, like my friend Graylin, who mostly draws hentai, but learning how to draw both men and women accurately is still important. So I started doing the same exercise as I did with a female figure. I also bought a few books about men. So far, the way I sketched a human figure mostly involves a stickman skeleton with circles for joints, and then I just kind of sketch out the outline of the figure based on that and the reference. But I do think I hit a plateau because I started looking for ideas on how to roughly sketch a human figure, and that's when I noticed the rib cage and the diaper. So I decided it might be worth a try to incorporate into my sketching process. It would also just be a lot easier to think about in a 3D perspective when you have shapes that aren't just spheres. I know there is the box method and a ton of quick tips online about what shapes to use when constructing a figure, but personally, I think I will probably focus on learning about the skeleton underneath and abstracting some of the shapes to use as guidelines for whenever I sketch out the human figure. Who knows? We'll see what I do when I lock in and start focusing on anatomy for real this time. How cheap is a skeleton anyway? But besides that, I don't really have much else to show off. I'd say I'm more confident now, and at least I have the ability to puzzle something together on my own, compared to copying something that already exists. It's not necessarily amazing, but after only about 8 months of drawing, I guess I've gotten far. And I was honestly thinking more about the future, rather than worrying about what I could do and achieve within the 90 days of anime. So you could say I was planning for the future and chillaxing this time around. Currently, I plan on studying anatomy for a while, and by that I mean like actually study anatomy and really go in depth. Next up would be backgrounds and perspective. I also should look into coloring soon, so that's probably what I'll post about next time. Anatomy, backgrounds, perspective, and colors. I think there is going to be some time before I make another 90 days of type of video, but if you really want another one, then you'll have to ask nicely in the comments. But that's about it. Let me know what you think.